Hey folks, welcome back to another History of Tomorrow and 14 Points Daily. Today my theme is history is not a handmaiden. What do I mean by that? Well, when history was born, properly speaking, with the inquiries of Herodotus, there was no sense that somehow history was a subject that needed to be subordinated to some other type of set of ideas or way of thinking. It was simply to be conducted as an inquiry into the nature of the world we live in order to seek out a revelation and explanation of that world. That's exactly how Herodotus understood it. But if we were to look at what history has become, and certainly what it has tended to be over the long course of the story, it is that history has become, well, today it's much worse, but let's just go with, for the moment, the theme of history being a handmaiden, because once the Greeks were done and the Romans copied them, there really wasn't all too much that had been evolved at that point in terms of what history means. But of course, then with the arrival of Christianity, what we find is that history is rendered into a subservient pursuit, right? Because the understanding, the supposed understanding of the world is provided in advance. And the meaning of everything is given in advance by a certain religious belief. And so therefore, history becomes a rather facile endeavor in which all you have to do is find evidence that supports the thesis that you were already operating under. And in the case of that, with the Christians of the Dark Ages, of course, it meant that everything should be interpreted as somehow being a sign of God's will. So it was the religionists that first turned history into a handmaiden. But then the philosophers did the same thing. And many people to this day think of history as the handmaiden of philosophy. And so it was the Enlightenment thinkers that did that, of course, because they were obsessed with the idea of progress and of an age of reason. And so they believed in that in not too different a way than the Christians believed in the meaning of history being religious. They believed in it being some sort of, providential force in the form of reason unfolding through the world. And so for them, history became the confirmation of their bias, the confirmation of their pre-existing thesis. And ever since that time, history has truly not been able to emerge as its own subject. The only attempt to do so was a very destructive attempt by Leopold von Ranke and the thinkers of the 19th century in Germany, who insisted that history be the study of the past. Now, in a certain sense, that's a kind of liberation of history, because the Enlightenment thinkers had enslaved history to philosophy, and the Rankians were saying, no, history has its own worth, its own identity. The problem is they rendered it into the study of the past, hence something useless, because we don't live in the past. We live in the present. And what we need is a subject that will integrate the past and present and operate as a revelation and explanation of the world we live in, and by extension, a predictive framework for thinking about and predicting how ideas will play out and what will in fact occur, and to anticipate and to position oneself in light of the realities that are understood and provided by history. And so the Rankians really did us a disservice by trying to defend history. Their intention, you could say their intention was good, but they ruined it because it became a sterile subject, much like just pure physical science, and these things are not the same. And so now we find ourselves in a situation where the only defense of history that was mounted in modern times by the Rankians was in fact more damaging to history than protective of it. And the result is that the people that insist on enslaving history to their own purposes have rendered history into a whore. basically, where are we, right? We are now at a time in which there is no meaning whatsoever to history. History's meaning is assigned by fragmentary factions warring in the culture wars against one another and cherry-picking their arguments and their facts at will, and there's really nothing to be done about it. There is no way for somebody to use history in a positive way to defend any particular value because it's been rendered into a quote-unquote narrative. So we're in particularly dire straits because history has been utterly prostituted, and now if you think about history, the only thing you can think about is some sort of disgusting facsimile of what the thing actually is. So we need to solve that. We need, all of us as human beings need the emancipation of history once again. It can't be a handmaiden, it can't be a slave, and it can't be a prostitute on behalf of other subjects, however those fields may be cognate to history and have insights to offer. History is something. It is what it is. Properly speaking, in my view, in present centrism, it is the revelation and explanation of the world we live in. All right, I hope that was food for thought. See you again soon.